Hey guys, in this video, let's talk about how to craft a great data science resume. Having a great resume is critical for you to stand out from the competition and land job interviews. In this video, we are going to look at a few things to help you create a great data science resume. They are the goal of a resume, different sections, and how to order those sections in your resume. And I will share with you a pro tip to help you increase the chances of success. Then I will share with you a checklist for you to go over before finalizing your resume. Finally, I have action items for you to work on so that we can work together to create a great data science resume for you. Okay, that's the outline of this video. Let's start with the goal of a resume. The goal of a data science resume is to land interviews. The entire resume needs to be centered on that goal. What this means is that we want to highlight data science related skills and experience, such as your work experience, the trainings you have done, and skill sets you have that are relevant to data science. Anything not relevant to that will not help you reach your goal. And putting too much information will only distract recruiters and hiring managers. With this goal in mind, I want to share with you a few general guidelines to make a great resume. But before we do that, I want to put out a disclaimer. The suggestions in this video apply to big and medium-sized companies and startups that receive a large volume of resumes in the magnitude of hundreds or thousands of resumes per month, and they need quick ways to say no. Typically, those companies have an automated resume screening to select candidates. They don't review every single resume manually. What they do is that they have the automated system to pick candidates and to reject candidates that are not qualified for the job description. So we need to beat automated screening to include certain phrases of job descriptions and repeat keywords in your resume. What this also means is that suggestions in this video may not work for small startups that are looking for candidates with very specific skills. They may review every single resume manually to look for candidates who have experience in a very specific area or domain. Okay, now let's move forward to two general guidelines to make a good data science resume. Remember that even if your resume passed the automated resume screening, recruiters and hiring managers only spend 5 to 10 seconds on your resume. So we really need to keep it relevant and concise. The first guideline is to keep it to one page, and always keep it to one page. The reason is that hiring managers and recruiters may not even look at the second page or the third page if you have multiple pages in your resume. If you have too much content in your resume, you can try to reduce font size and page margin. And another thing you can do is to make descriptions in your resume more concise, and which we'll talk about more later on. Another guideline is to keep your resume to one column. The reason is that having one column is more readable than multiple columns. Here we have two examples. One resume has one column and the other one has two columns. As you can tell, the one with two columns is a bit too dense and it's harder to read than the one with one column. So a good practice is to keep your resume to one column. Now we have talked about two general guidelines. Let's move forward to different sections and orders of those sections on your resume. There are 4 required sections: contact information, professional experience, technical skills, and education. There are also 4 optional sections. You only want to include those sections when you have extra space on your resume or your resume is too empty, and they are experience summary, projects, publications, certificates. There are also a few sections to avoid, and they are hobbies, volunteer experience, interests, because those sections are less relevant to data science than other sections. The reason we want to have only 4 required sections and remove unnecessary sections is because too many sections make it hard to find useful information. What we are going to do next is we are going to look at the 4 required sections one by one to make sure your resume follows the best practice for each section. The first section on your resume is always contact information. This section is pretty straightforward. You want to have your full name, your phone number, your email address, your LinkedIn profile, and your address in the contact information. You can also consider adding your GitHub profile after your LinkedIn profile. In your GitHub profile, you can pin the important repos on your homepage, and you can pin up to 6. So when hiring managers look at your GitHub profile, they will see the most important repos first. Don't include a link to your GitHub if it's empty. In terms of address, you don't need to specify the exact address. Keep it at the city level is good enough. Now let's move forward to professional experience. This section is the most important section in your resume. This is a section about positions you held at different companies. Now, if you have 2+ years of experience, this section should always go at the top of your resume under contact information, as this is section recruiters and hiring managers care most about. So what information should you include in this section? For the position, you want to have the position, the company, the location, and time duration. In this example, we see the position is data scientist, foundation, and infrastructure. The company is Airbnb. Location is San Francisco, California. And time duration is March 2019 to present. You also want to remove all non-relevant information. For example, you don't need to have full-time data scientist, as full-time does not provide extra helpful information for recruiters and hiring managers. Now here's a pro tip. If a company you worked with is not well known, it's helpful to have one sentence high level explaining what the organization does and what is it amazing to work there. After the position, the company, location, and time duration, you can include brief description of each of the responsibilities and achievements. Now in the description, you want to use strong verbs. Strong verbs are those that highlight your role and the results. For example, we prefer verbs like led, drove, created, optimized, and improved, rather than verbs like processed, coded, and completed. Here's a link to over 180 active verbs that you can use to impress hiring managers. Because this section on professional experience is so important on your resume, we're going to spend some time to see how to make it concise and clear. Remember that your resume reflects your communication skills, so it's important that we improve the content of the resume to communicate important achievements and experience clearly and concisely. The first tip I have for you is to prioritize. For each position, list experiences and achievements in order of importance rather than chronologically. For each experience, you want to include no more than 5 bullet points. There are about 8 bullet points in this experience, and it becomes too hard to find useful information. Another tip is to limit each bullet point to 2 lines, 2 physical lines, not sentences, so that everything is easy to read and concise. This is another counter example. In this example, for both bullet points, there are about 4 lines in total. And it makes it very hard to find useful information and to understand the impact of each bullet point. So a good rule of thumb is to limit to 5 bullet points and each bullet point to 2 physical lines. Another tip to make the description concise and clear is to be impact-oriented. The first bullet point in each experience should be the most impactful one, and the impact should be measured by business metrics. Here we have 3 good examples. Led sprint planning and execution of revamping internal product documentation for a team of 4 data scientists, 50% reduction in new hire onboarding time. Created and implemented framework and system design for metric reporting and anomaly detection of 500+ active rules for 400+ merchants with $100 million daily total payment volume, TPV. Part of a 3 data scientist team that owns feature engineering for fraud detection system, adding 300 new features, resulting in reducing the false positive rate from 20% to 15% while keeping the false negative the same. Another tip to highlight your impact is don't tell, show. Show by numbers and metrics, because your experience and skills are more reliable and trustworthy if you have numbers and metrics to measure them. Here are some examples. Instead of saying significantly increased conversion rate, what we can do is we say doubled conversion rate from 0.3% to 0.6%, translating to $2 million increase in annual revenue. Another example is process survey data to process 1 TB of unstructured survey text data. Greatly improved model performance can be more specific as well. We can say improved accuracy by 20% and reduced training time by 30% using XGBoost model. Strong coding skills can be better. It can be contributed 2,000 lines to Apache Airflow using Python. Okay, now you know how to make these descriptions more outcome-oriented or impact-oriented. Let's move forward to another tip. Be concise. The first thing you can do is to rearrange verbose expressions. Aim to be as concise as possible in your word choice. For example, in order to can be shortened as to, is able to can be replaced by can. Here's an example of a concise description. The original description is like this. Use Atom Optimizer with parse categorical cross-entropy. As we are dealing with categorical data, with accuracy as metrics, I have predicted with 89% accuracy whether the customer will buy again or not. So we can shorten these two sentences into one, using Atom Optimizer with categorical data to predict customers' repurchasing decision with 89% accuracy. Another example is this one. The original sentence was created different pricing models using linear regression, random forest, and a gradient boosting tree. Gradient boosting method achieved 96.7% accuracy over actual model after validating with a new dataset. So we can definitely change these two sentences into one, which is created different pricing models such as linear regression, random forest, and gradient boosting trees, and achieved 96.7% accuracy by cross-validation. As you can see, there are quite a few ways that we can make the description more concise. Now, another tip I have for you is don't get too technical. We only want to include the information relevant to the job to which you are applying. Too many technical jargons make your resume difficult to understand and unnecessarily wordy. Here's an example. Actually, this is the same example we used earlier. What we can do is we can use Atom Optimizer with parse categorical cross-entropy to simply use Atom Optimizer. This term may be too technical, and adding this term is not helpful in terms of explaining the impact of the project. Okay, that's all the tips I have for you to make the section professional experience concise and clear. Now let's move on to another required section, technical skills. Here's an example of technical skills or technical capabilities. There are three things to keep in mind when you create this section. The first thing is to organize. All the relevant skills you have can become quite a list. We want to make things easy to digest, so we can place them in categories. Here you can see there are 5 categories: programming language, statistics, machine learning, database, data visualization. Also, it's helpful to remove common skills such as Git, Notebook, MS Word, and Excel, because these skills are not super relevant to data science, and adding these skills does not help increase the competitiveness of your resume. Lastly, we want to be selective of the skills you include in this section. Don't include skills you are not good at. We want to highlight the ones that are most relevant to the job. It can weaken your resume if you claim to be an expert in too many things, because this is just not convincing. Now let's move forward to another required section, the last required section, education. In this section, we want to include information such as school, degree, and time of graduation. Relevant coursework and GPA are optional. Here's an example. It has the school, the degree, and time of graduation. Now, if you have 2+ years of experience, don't include relevant coursework and GPA. Focus on professional experience instead, because the section on professional experience is the section that hiring managers care most about. Now, we have talked about 4 required sections. They are contact information, professional experience, technical skills, and education. There are also some optional sections. Before we go over these optional sections, I want to mention that only include the optional sections if you have extra space on your resume. Otherwise, you don't need to consider adding those sections. Now let's go over them briefly. The first optional section is experience summary. You can put experience summary before professional experience. Typically, this is a brief summary of your experience. You can use a bullet point format or just use a few sentences to summarize your experience and your capability. But this section is less important than professional experience, and this is a nice to have, not a must-have in your resume. So you can consider adding this section if you have extra space or your resume is a bit too empty. Another optional section is projects. You can consider include this section when you don't have enough work experience or your work experience is not relevant to data science. And you only include the most impactful projects, not all the projects you have done. Okay. Another thing to note is to avoid cookie cutter projects. Some popular projects such as Titanic, sentiment analysis of tweets, stock trading, chatbots, etc. Those projects do not help demonstrate your creativity or technical depth. So avoid this kind of cookie cutter projects and consider adding projects that demonstrate your originality and technical depth. Okay, another thing that's helpful is to make sure the project names make sense to non-technical people. Here we have 3 examples: gaming data science, NLP jobs growth analysis, NLP recipe classification. We can change the names to be gaming fraud detection, jobs growth analysis, make recipe search faster, to make sure that even non-technical people can understand the goal of those projects. Another thing can be really helpful is to add links to your projects. These are some good examples. You see there are links to a specific project. When you click on the link, the reader will be redirected to a web page. So you can put the analysis you have done, the visualization you have done for those projects to demonstrate your skills. This is a very nice way to demonstrate that you have put so much time and effort into building your project portfolio. The last optional section is publications. You can include papers and blog posts in this section. If you do have publications, link to your Google Scholar profile will be very helpful. If you are co-author of a paper with other authors, it's helpful to bold your name in the author list. Okay, these are the optional sections you can consider adding to your resume. And remember that you only consider add an optional section when you have extra space after all those required sections. So far, we have talked about the required sections and optional sections. Let's move forward to a pro tip. The pro tip I want to share with you is to customize your resume for each position. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, many companies have automated resume screening system, and it's important that the keywords in the job description appear multiple times in your resume. What we can do is we can make adjustments to the professional experience section and the technical skills section in terms of what you include and what you put first to best suit each job description. It may sound like a lot of work, but let me show you an example. It's actually pretty simple. Here's an example of keyword extraction and matching. We have a job description of data scientist, consumer product, metrics team at Twitter. As you can see from this job description, there are a few keywords such as vast datasets, sophisticated statistical techniques, identify causal impact and attribution, build and benchmark metrics, forecast future performance, etc. Here's an example of a resume. So we do see some relevancy between the keywords in the job description and this resume, right? So here I link the specific keywords to a specific bullet point in the resume. So what we can do is we can select the relevant bullet points and then adding details to those bullet points to best suit the job description. Selecting the relevant points and adding details to these points will make the resume suit the job description better. Another thing we can do is we can also simplify the technical skills section. These are the technical skills in the original resume. What we can do is we can select the skills that are most relevant to the job description, and we can organize the skills in a way that is aligned with the requirement of the position. So by tweaking professional experience and technical skills, we can customize the resume to better suit the specific position. Okay, now we have covered the pro tip I have for you. Let's move forward to checklist. I have created this list for you so that you can go over them before finalizing your resume. The first item is to make sure there's no typos in your resume. A typo suggests a lack of attention to detail. I once had a client who was complaining to me about not getting any interview after applying for jobs actively for 6 months. When I look at their resume, the first thing I noticed was that they misspelled Gmail. So that's why they did not get any interviews. So a pro tip for you is to use Grammarly to make sure there's no typos in your resume. You can go to the website and upload your resume. This tool will detect the typos and grammatic mistakes in your resume and help you with correcting those mistakes. Another thing you can do is to install the Chrome extension. Once you install this extension, and when you work on your resume in a Google Doc, it can detect the typos and the grammatic mistakes automatically. Okay, another item on the checklist is to make sure you have all required sections. There are only 4 required sections: contact information, professional experience, technical skills, and education. Another thing to notice is to make sure you minimize abbreviations. Do not risk the recruiter and the hiring manager not knowing what you mean. For example, you should spell out the term machine learning rather than using ML to ensure that recruiters understand. Another thing to check is to make sure all links on your resume are working. If you have links to your LinkedIn profile, to your GitHub profile, or links to projects or specific publications, make sure all links are working. Finally, the last item on the checklist is to make sure your resume is a well-formatted PDF. Send your resume as a PDF instead of an editable format like Google Docs, because the editable format may not render perfectly on other people's computers. Here's an example of not well-formatted resume. You see a broken line in the resume. So make sure your resume is well-formatted and is in PDF format. Lastly, I want to give you a few action items. The first thing is to make a copy of this resume template. Everyone has access to it, and you just need to make a copy of this document, and then you can use this template for your resume. Once you make a copy of this template, you can then update your resume based on what we have talked about in this video. Alright guys, that's the action items I have for you. I will see you in the next video.